What if I told you that in 1970, the two biggest enemies in American automotive history, Ford and Chrysler, made a secret deal? Not to sell cars, not to build a new model, but to fight NASCAR itself. It sounds impossible, blasphemous even. Two corporate rivals that spent years trying to destroy each other, suddenly working together behind closed doors. And yet, it happened. This wasn't business. This was rebellion. A silent act of defiance against the very organization that defined American racing. And at the center of this storm stood one man, Buddy Baker, the fearless racer who drove both Ford and Dodge machines faster than anyone thought possible. The man who secretly tested the limits of two warring brands on the same tracks, and the man who became the bridge between enemies. This is the untold story of the Aero Wars, when innovation met defiance, when two corporate giants secretly united to challenge authority, and when NASCAR faced its greatest internal rebellion. The story begins not with politics, but with speed. The rise of the Aero Wars. The year was 1969. America was obsessed with horsepower, and NASCAR was its ultimate proving ground. Ford wanted dominance, Chrysler wanted revenge, and both were willing to do whatever it took. Ford fired first, introducing the Torino Talladega and Mercury Cyclone, Spoiler 2, sleek machines shaped by science rather than style. These cars were built in wind tunnels, long, low, and slippery. Chrysler struck back hard. They unleashed monsters, the Dodge Charger Daytona and Plymouth Superbird, winged, outrageous, and terrifyingly effective. These weren't just race cars, they were aerodynamic missiles, the result of engineers throwing the rulebook out the window. And under their hoods lived two of the most fearsome power plants ever made. Ford's Boss 429 and Chrysler's legendary 426 Hemi. Together, these cars redefined the word speed. Lap times dropped, speeds climbed past 190 miles per hour, and drivers began to realize they were piloting weapons, not cars. The Aero Wars had begun, and NASCAR, the very body that created this battleground, had no idea what it had unleashed. NASCAR's breaking point. By early 1970, NASCAR was reaching its limit. The races weren't just fast, they were too fast. Cars were flying off the tracks, engines were exploding, and officials were terrified. The defining moment came at Talladega Superspeedway, a track so massive and so fast that drivers themselves were scared to run on it. Enter Buddy Baker, the man known for his iron nerves and lead foot. On March 24, 1970, behind the wheel of a Dodge Charger Daytona, Baker did what no one else had ever done. He became the first driver in NASCAR history to break 200 miles per hour. It was a record-shattering moment, a declaration that technology had officially outpaced regulation. But to NASCAR, it was a nightmare. Because Baker's run didn't just prove the Daytona's dominance, it exposed NASCAR's loss of control. The speeds were now beyond human reaction time, and the cars, with their towering wings and bullet noses, had become faster than the sport could safely contain. So NASCAR did what authorities always do when they feel threatened. They rewrote the rules. Overnight, they banned the very thing that made these machines special: winged bodies, oversized engines, radical aerodynamics. The Aero Wars were over, or so the world thought. The secret pact. What happened next shocked even the insiders. Behind the closed doors of Detroit boardrooms, both Ford and Chrysler were furious. They had spent millions perfecting technology that was now useless. Wind tunnel designs, race data, prototypes, all locked away because NASCAR said no. And in that frustration, something unthinkable happened. The two rivals made contact. Ford and Chrysler, the fiercest enemies in the auto industry, quietly formed a secret alliance. Publicly, they continued to compete. Privately, they began sharing test data, wind tunnel notes, and sometimes even engineers, all with one goal: to outsmart NASCAR's new restrictions, It was the first and last time in history that two automotive giants would secretly unite against the very sport they helped build. And in the middle of it all was Buddy Baker, the man both companies trusted with their most guarded machines. Buddy Baker, the double agent of speed. By 1970, Buddy Baker was no ordinary driver. He had become something more, a test pilot of rebellion. While fans thought he was just another racer switching teams, insiders knew the truth. Baker was the go-between, the man testing both Ford and Dodge prototypes on the same tracks. He'd test a Ford Talladega one day and a Dodge Daytona the next. His job wasn't to win races. It was to gather knowledge, real-world, high-speed data that both companies could quietly use. Ford wanted to understand Chrysler's secret weapon, the stability of the winged Charger at extreme speeds. Chrysler wanted to decode Ford's superior handling and throttle control. And Baker? He wanted to drive the fastest machine on Earth, no matter whose name was stamped on the hood. It was dangerous, it was controversial, it was genius. But secrets in racing never stay buried for long. The unholy alliance. Exposed by the summer of 1970, the whispers started. Something didn't add up. Ford engineers were spotted at Chrysler test facilities. Certain design tweaks looked suspiciously similar across both teams. And journalists began asking the one question no one dared to speak aloud. Are Ford and Chrysler working together? When Buddy Baker began setting records in cars from both brands, the rumors exploded. It was too much to ignore. What had started as whispered gossip turned into an open secret. Ford and Chrysler, sworn enemies, had defied every corporate boundary and every NASCAR regulation. They hadn't just bent the rules, they had teamed up to fight the rulemakers themselves. And that terrified NASCAR, because if rival corporations could secretly collaborate to outsmart the governing body, then NASCAR's authority, its entire structure, meant nothing. The rebellion had gone too far. The fallout. NASCAR struck back hard. In late 1970, the organization rewrote its rulebook again, this time with surgical precision. Winged cars were permanently banned. Engine sizes were restricted to 305 cubic inches. Aerodynamic testing was heavily limited. It was NASCAR's way of saying, never again. The message was clear. Innovation would now be controlled, not celebrated. Within months, both Ford and Chrysler pulled their factory teams. The wild Aero era, the most radical chapter in stock car history, was over. And Buddy Baker? He went back to racing like nothing had happened. Publicly, he downplayed his role. Privately, he carried the memory of a time when two corporations dared to join forces against the establishment, and won, if only for a moment. Because while NASCAR banned their creations, it could never erase what they proved. That speed, when unchained, is unstoppable. The legacy of rebellion. Today, the Ford-Chrysler secret alliance remains one of the most fascinating and controversial mysteries in motorsport history. Officially, no documents confirm it. No executives ever admitted it. But the clues remain in the design similarities, in the test logs, in the whispered testimonies from retired engineers. Even decades later, the evidence is impossible to ignore. Both brands emerged from the Aero wars with uncanny aerodynamic knowledge that would influence everything from NASCAR cars to muscle cars to Le Mans prototypes for decades. The Dodge Charger Daytona and Plymouth Superbird became icons, band legends that proved innovation could terrify authority. The Ford Torino Talladega became a symbol of precision and balance, and Buddy Baker, the man caught between worlds, went down in history as the driver who touched both sides of the rebellion and lived to tell the tale. He never bragged about it, but his record-breaking 200-mile-per-hour run and his quiet collaboration behind the scenes told a story far louder than words. More than 50 years later, a single question still echoes through the halls of racing history. What if Ford and Chrysler hadn't stopped? What if the Aero wars had raged on, unrestrained and ungoverned? Would NASCAR have evolved into something faster, fiercer? or would it have destroyed itself in the fire of ambition? That's the weight of this story. A reminder that when passion breaks its chains, it defies every rule. Those winged beasts weren't just machines, they were acts of rebellion, proof that rivals could unite when power tried to cage innovation. Buddy Baker didn't just test engines, he tested loyalty, courage, and history itself. So next time you see a Daytona's wing or a Talladega's curve, ask yourself, what if they never stopped? Hit like, subscribe, and remember, history doesn't whisper, it roars.